Welcome to the craziness of live broadcasting. How you doing, Marcus?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
It's what is it? Fourth week of summer break. I'm at that middle of summer. Have lost count of where I am, who I am, all of
Yeah,
that
that's good.
existential crisis.
That's good. You should not know what day it is. You should really not know what time it is.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm a few weeks ahead of you with summer. So we're getting to the point of like the boredom parts of summer, which I absolutely love when there's like all the field trips are exhausted and kids are getting tired of, being dragged around. So now we're all just kind of hanging out, reading books and trying. It's just been so hot here. Has it been hot where you are?
Not to the degree of where you were at. We did a trip to St. Louis, and it was definitely hot there, and it's a
Yeah.
reminder of those Arkansas heyday for me that
Yeah.
decade. That humidity. But it's hot, but it's not. I mean, Pacific Northwest, I feel like gets the coolest of the summers. Typically, there's some
Yeah.
exceptions to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it peaks at like 80, 85 most days. And yeah, mornings are really nice. So anyhow, yeah, that's your weather update from Oregon.
Well, that's okay. I'm envious because we're at like 105, 106 every day. So it's been really, really, really hot. But
Do you think of your summer as do you have like stages in your mind or like seasons of summer as like a teacher on summer break?
I do.
Yeah, what are they for
I
you?
do.
Like everyone's
So
got those, whether they name them or not.
yeah, I have this decompression phase at the beginning, and I try and get into it as quickly as possible because I know that if I prolong it, it's going to eat up my summer. If it, like, I don't want to be decompressing like a month into summer, so I try and like hurry up, close up my classroom, shut down my computer, not check email, and then just decompress as quickly as possible. Um, and then I start getting back to like feeling more human. I start, eating breakfast when I want to eat and going to the bathroom when I want to go to the bathroom. And that lasts a little bit. Usually I jump into a couple of books early on just so that I can really disconnect. And then there's this phase where it's kind of it's like the boring part of summer where I'm not stir crazy because I'm an indoor cat. I mean, I'll go outside if I have to, but I love being inside in the AC. So I'm perfectly content with just a book, or watching a movie or doing some writing inside. But at this point, people start to get a little stir crazy, me, the kids, spouse. And so that's kind of where we are now. And then pretty soon it's like the last part of summer is crap, school's starting in like 2 weeks and I need more time. I want more time, that kind of thing. So those are my brief phases of summer.
Yeah, and I think that's for me, from just a pure educator mindset. I feel like there's the imagining off switch of not obviously given that we're doing this
Yeah.
not off switch of education, but off switch of the specifics of oh, what am I doing the first 6 weeks? Oh, what am I
Right.
teaching, etc. Of
Yeah.
specific to my context, but more just thinking about things and reading what I want to read and exploring things like Trevor Ailio's literary theory and the
Yeah.
stuff that I'm okay, well, imagining what this could look like. Reading other books, doing the poem a day thing
Yeah.
with Brett and Shanae. Those are in my imagination zone. And then at some point it shifts to the much more pragmatic, what do I need to do to make sure I start the year well? And I feel like
Yeah.
once August hits, because we don't start till the first week of September,
Yeah.
but August, you have stuff going on, so you don't have as
Right.
much time. And I really have I'm pretty good about boundaries and much more so than before, which might surprise people. In terms of not having to work when I don't want to outside of the work hours.
Mhm.
But I do really believe in making the investment in those weeks leading into the school year to be really planned out so
Yeah.
that then I can be flexible and responsive to
Yeah.
my classroom those opening weeks. Because if I'm trying to come up with lesson plans and slides on
Right.
top of everything else those first few weeks, I really feel like I'm kind of locked in and I can't be nimble in the way I need to just
Yeah.
respond to student feedback or surveys
Yep.
and check in with students and
Yep.
just be present. I feel like if I'm too, so I do definitely do a lot of work to get ready for the school year in those first few weeks before the end of the summer,
Yeah.
but we're not there yet. We still got some time. So I'm
Yeah.
in that
That's good.
boring phase, which I enjoy.
Good. That's good. Yeah. It always goes by too quickly, and I'm always feeling like, man, I wish I just had a little bit more time. And then same thing with you, like during that setup time before school starts, I always wish I had, 2 weeks to get prepped instead of just 1 week. So, but such is life, it just goes on, you know, we get,
Yes.
we get through. So yeah,
So how do you want to do this? Do you want to just like kind of like hit on some of the questions that people send in?
sure.
Well, keep it going.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the great part about live is that we really don't have like a set script. I mean, I love the fact that some people sent in questions already, which is kind of nice so that I don't have to vamp. Um, but yeah, I'm happy to just jump in wherever you're jumping in. So you want
Yeah,
to just start at the top,
and if
work our way
anyone's
down?
for sure, and I feel like if anyone's listening in and they like want to toss a question in, we can like definitely respond to it. Or if there's a topic that you'd like us to just vamp on, because I think one thing I enjoy is like number one, we've had many of these conversations sort of
Yeah.
past like the awkwardness of like the first podcast conversation, which is
Yeah.
like just inevitable. And then also the vantage points, like even though there's a lot of shared values, I believe at this point, you're coming from an elementary perspective. I'm
Yeah.
coming from a high school perspective. So instead of just like, I think a lot of times like I end up talking to English teachers in high school. It's like,
Yeah.
well, that's a very a niche perspective. So I
Yeah.
think that that has value. Well,
Well, and I'm the
actually,
same way. I can talk to elementary teachers all day long, and then I forget that if there's a secondary teacher out there, they're like, well, and I know I've made this mistake with you. I'm like, well, why don't you just do it this way? You're like, I've got 200 kids, Adrian, and I'm like, oh, that's right. You do have like a lot of students over multiple periods. So I've definitely made that mistake too.
so I'm gonna go with the let's just dive into this first question because I'm
Yeah.
actually guessing that this might be a place where you and I kind of disagree, which would
Yeah.
might be an interesting thing. And a lot of these questions, which I appreciate, are from early career or teachers who are going into their first year of teaching. A few
Okay.
of them are
Yeah.
from a teacher who's about to start their first year, and I thought these were really thoughtful questions that applied not just to early career teachers but everyone.
Yeah.
And I just thought that'd be a good place for starting a conversation. So I'm gonna start with this one. I'm just gonna read verbatim
Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
sent in. Uh, Establishing systems is important, and we'd like to have ones as new teachers that align with our philosophies of education, but are also pragmatic. How do teachers thoughtfully build systems, even mundane ones like late work and hall passes, which I don't think are mundane, I'd add, and like I feel like those matter a lot.
Yeah.
Uh, what works, but then what do you do when you realize the system isn't working? Or more broadly, what if your school has a system that doesn't align with your philosophy?
Yeah.
So, Adrian, you're an elementary teacher. You've got a lot of systems I'm sure you have to
Yeah.
navigate. Like, what are your thoughts immediately after that question?
Well, I like the part that jumps out to me is the part that what if they're not working? And so for me, for the longest time, I was always afraid of starting over. Like I figured like once you set up stuff at the beginning of the year, you're stuck or you're married to those systems throughout the whole year. And I remember many a year of suffering through like, man, this isn't working, but I've got to do it this way because this is the way I set it up. Um, so for me, I have often, especially when I've had challenging classrooms, I've done just a reset, like a reboot. Like we're gonna do the first day of school over again. And it does take time away from the curriculum. It takes time away from everything. But if I feel like systems are not working, then I need to do a hard reset and I need to tap into like my students and get their perspectives of what's happening or what's not happening, what's working, what's not working. So to that end, I try and involve my students as much as I can early on with building these systems. Um, depending on, I mean, there's because it's elementary, I need systems for going to the bathroom. I need systems for asking questions, sharpening pencils, like all that stuff. So we establish all of those things. But for me, like you said, it's those aren't mundane. Like those are the little ones that add up to make a successful classroom run successfully. Um, and so I just try to involve my students as much as possible. Um, it's I find that to the person's question about what happens if like you're in a building where it's not aligned with you're trying to set up systems that are different from what the expectations are. It, for me, I tend to err on the side of like human systems, like trying to focus on the humanity of my students, and I have a hard time visualizing an administrator coming in and saying, "You're being too human to your students, you need to stop. So I mean, I guess that is possible, but I tend to err on that side. Um, because if I don't, and I have a system that's like really not meeting the needs of my students, that's when I'll get complaints. Like I'll get parents saying, you made my child hold it and couldn't go to the bathroom for like 3 hours that day. Like how, like those are the things I'll get pushback on, not on the other side. But your kids are older, so I'm curious. Do you really have a lot of like of the little systems that I have in elementary school, or is it because you have like young adults?
Yeah, I mean, like emphasis on the young, right? Like in terms of the start of the year, setting up systems.
Yeah,
I mean, like first thing you said that like resonates with me is like that reboot reset because I think sometimes we get like, oh, I guess we'll fix it next year. It's like no, like pause and then integrate student feedback and then make a reset when you need to. I
yeah,
think really intentional. A piece of advice I got like early in my career because I do think we have lots of systems. I think they're smaller in some ways, but they matter. Is like when you're mapping out unit one or whatever your first instructional unit, like you also need to teach your systems to your students for your classroom.
yeah,
And that can be as simple as like, what does the opening of class look like? What does the closing of class? What does it look like when we get our spiral notebooks and set them up? What does it look
yep,
like when we transition from individual work to group work or even asking a question or, hall passes, things like that. And one of the things that I have seen and experienced that I don't think is very effective is doing that all on one day. Like, okay, first
oh,
day of school, we're gonna read through the syllabus and talk through all of our systems. Like, I like try to like figure out what are the ones we need like right away. We'll do like one or two a class period for the first few weeks, and definitely like monitor how they're going so that we can reset. Because I do think it's a real thing of like it's really hard for systems to get better, a lot of them, without resetting. They don't like if you have a bat, for example, if you start the year and you really struggle with like the last part of class where like kids are getting in earlier, they're getting out of their seats early and lining up at the door even though you don't want them to, like things like that, that's not gonna magically resolve itself.
right,
Like, you either are gonna, like you need to set this standard expectation of what you want for your room and hold that because it's actually gonna get harder probably as the year goes on for a lot of systems.
yeah,
So I do think being intentional on the front side matters. Uh, it's tricky, though, because, like, what happens if you're in like, in terms of systems and classroom systems, I know there are teachers out there who do things like, use behavior for parts of student grades. Like I don't care what they call them. If it's like,
yeah,
here's your like academic grade or like professional student grade or whatever. Of like, oh,
mhm,
you only use 3 hall passes this semester, so here's 5 points. Like,
yeah,
what if you're in a PLC and you're a first or a second year teacher? And they're doing things like that, or like, hey, if you turn in your hall passes at the end of the year, like here's your extra credits, so don't use them. Like where I don't think of those as very human
yeah,
systems. And I don't think that reflects like a grade as academic learning. But I also know if you're a first year teacher and you're in like a team that's agreed to this, or maybe if your building has agreed to a system with late work, for instance, that says like, hey, late work is this percentage of penalty, and you don't believe in that, that puts you in a tricky spot, especially early in your career. What would you say if like an early career teacher reached out to you and said like, hey, my school is asking me to do something that doesn't align with my philosophy about what's best for students. I know you said like err on the side of being too human, but like you're saying that as like you've got 20 plus years of teaching under your belt.
yeah.
What would you say to an early career teacher who said that?
Gosh, that's hard because I remember being an early career teacher. In some ways, it's just easier to just do what everybody else is doing, even if it doesn't feel right, because it's really scary and it's hard to push back on a broader system outside of your classroom, whether it's your PLC or your, you know, grade level team or your school building. Um, Gosh, I'm the annoying questioner in our PLC. Like I will just ask an incessant amount of questions, especially if I'm new. So I love using, and I've been teased for it because I can't. You can only use being the new guy for like 2 years. I tried stretching it out for 3 years in a new building, and they were like, "Dude, Adrian, you're not new anymore." Like, but I definitely would err on the side of being the new person and say, like, "Well, I don't understand why. why are you doing it this way? Like, why? I mean, have we tried doing it something else? I'm new here. Help me understand why these systems are the way that they are. Because what I find is that when you press people to explain their pedagogy, especially if they haven't done so in a really long time, like I don't care what it is, whether it's how they teach math or a system they have for late work, if they've just always done it that way, and you ask them to like tell me, explain to me like I'm a kindergartner, why are you penalizing students for late work, and then just ask a bunch of questions. It really opens up it. I feel like it takes some of the awkwardness out of the room and the like the threateningness of like, here's my system, here's your system. I think my system's more human, therefore better than your system. It's more of just like, I see you've got this system. I'm trying help me understand why you're doing this system. And if the answer is, well, I've always done it this way, then my question is like, well, have you ever thought about trying it this way? And I feel like those conversations, although I'm not saying they're not awkward, they are definitely awkward. They get at some really great underlying values that need to come out when you're on a grade level team. And what better time to have them come out than during like team meetings, PLCs, and especially if you're a new teacher and you're trying to figure out what your values are. It helps to talk to your teammates and say, like, so Marcus, what do you value in your classroom around late work? Like, how do you handle that? Because maybe I have never really thought about it. Like, I've never really thought about what I should do. It's just kind of like a neutral policy that I've never really thought about. So I'd like to talk to my teammates. Marcus, how do you handle it? How do you handle it? How do you do this? And then I can come up with a system that I feel like works for me. And it may be kind of a bit of Marcus's and a bit of this person's and a bit of this person's, or it might be something completely different. But having those conversations, I feel like really help. Just asking a ton of questions. That's kind of my answer for that.
I feel like the questioning mindset, like I wrote down, like just like that phrase, like help me understand, is just such a tactful way to go about it. And I think it's like a tricky spot, right? Because I think like I'm lumping a lot of things into one question.
Yeah.
There's some that you're like, that's a red line for me, but I
Yeah.
think there's also a tendency, like, don't let like the way that your school distributes pencils or like a 5% late penalty. Like, if you're a first year teacher, like, I would say that shouldn't be your red line. Like,
Right.
I've had many things, like, I made the joke about like extra credit for hall passes. I was in a school with a really tricky, like, lack of support my very first year teaching, where like there was basically no support. You were on your own. And we were just like flailing, trying to find ways to like keep kids in classrooms. I definitely went through a stretch. I believe that like there was like extra credit for hall passes, which I would not do if I could go back. My
Yeah.
kids, fine. Like, I didn't like, it wasn't like over, lasting trauma. Like, those
Right.
classrooms were fine. So I think sometimes we can be like a little bit, and it's probably like, online, blue sky, any social media, like absolutist in how we talk about things. Like,
Right.
this is right or this is wrong. Like, this is better and we should aim for this. And there are
Yeah.
more just human systems. But if you're a new teacher, you got to kind of pick your battles too. Like, an example, like first year teaching in Arkansas, coming, from out of state with Teach for America, as like this new person in the community, like I got to my classroom and I was like, oh, here's the 10 commandments to put up on your wall. That I was like, nope, not doing that. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
like I didn't go to every other classroom, like take them down. I'm
Right.
just like, no,
Right.
like this is a red line. Like, I'm not doing this. And no one
Right.
made a big, like, I think there are some big things that like you're gonna, 10, 12 years later, I guess like that's the law of the land in some states.
I
So,
know. Isn't that's crazy?
but this was like, for me, I was like, wait, I think this is unconstitutional. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna do this. But I do think there is some wisdom in not making everything your battle
Yeah.
as a first year teacher, and really trying to like learn and understand, like, hey, can I see what this system looks like in your classroom? Because I think you have so many great conversations with just going and being in other teachers' classrooms, and then just like framing it as like, I want to learn from you because
Yeah.
I know my classroom is a work in progress.
Yeah.
All of us are, but like I
Yeah.
think having that mindset and humility and picking the battles is something I'd also offer. Like, yes, at this point in my career, I have some pretty strong views about what systems are more human
Yeah.
versus others. But I also know that 10 years ago, I was wrong about a lot of things. And 10
Yeah.
years from now, I'll probably look back at this version of me and be wrong. So I think
Yeah.
having some humility in the views that you hold, along with conviction is a tough balancing act.
Yeah.
That's tricky. Have you ever
That
had
is
any of
true.
those situations where you're like, oh, no, that's a red line for me?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And I really appreciate you framing it with just the choose your battles, because I think that it's easy to get in our head worried that like some sort of policy police is going to come into your room and like, and again, I'm speaking from a very privileged place. That's never happened to me, and there are teachers who are having districts dictate what posters can go up on their walls. So I know that this is like an actual thing, but I think in the vast majority of situations, pick and choose your battles, and but have a reason why. Don't just say I'm doing it because I don't like it or I don't agree with it. Like, be prepared to, like, when someone says, you need to put those 10 commandments back up on the wall, and that's your line, like, have a thoughtful response ready to go. Um, and don't be afraid to have those conversations. Now, in the end, they may force your hand and say, you know what, you're going to have to put that poster back up on the wall. And then that's a hard place to be in. I've never been at an impasse that harsh where it's like, you have to do it this way. And I'm like, no, I can't. And they're like, "Yes, you have to." Like, I've never had that kind of an impasse before, um, but I have had some really uncomfortable conversations, valuable conversations with admin about why I'm doing certain things, and I have made some concessions and, like, picking and choosing my battles, nothing that goes against my values, but picking and choosing my battles about, like, "You know what? I understand where you're coming from. Here's what I'll concede, but this is still my line. I'm gonna try and hold to that as much as I can." But have you ever had something where it's been like that, like a real butting of the heads?
I think, yeah, I've been thinking back, and again, all the examples I'm giving are like from past schools
Yeah,
in the state, and I think a lot of this, like, I'll come back. I'm gonna circle back to your direct question. I think a lot of it is about relationships too, and
yeah,
like if you are seen as a teacher who's like giving it your best, and you're coming out from a place of like really understanding, like giving the most to your school and to your students in your classroom, and people see you as that, you're going to get a
yeah,
lot more wiggle room when you choose
yeah,
your battles,
yeah,
than others. And as a new teacher, that's really hard. So like
yeah,
none of the stuff we're talking about is easy. I think also knowing your values. I mean, I obviously too much talk about like that opening values activity we do, but like I really think about that as like a working lens, as not
mhm,
just for my classroom, but like I need to know my own values as a teacher and educator, and I also need to be able to perceive the values of the people I'm working with. Because if you share values with someone, you can find a solution. And sometimes you need to know when you might not share values,
yeah,
including, and that's tricky, right? If you're in a school that doesn't share your values, like that puts you in a tough spot, but you need to be like clear eyed about that. But the reason I bring that up is like find the people in your building who share your values as an early career teacher. And that might take some time. It might not be like week one, even like year one, because then you can be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. What do you do in your classroom with this? Like, I
yeah,
don't think this is the most human system. Like, build a coalition of teachers who put value human and the humanity of the students and all students, not just some students,
yeah,
and find out what they're doing, especially like veterans. And then also, if you're that veteran teacher, specifically if you're coming from a place of like privilege, I think you need to leverage your privilege and your experience. Like, you should be the one fighting that battle, not that first year
right.
teacher. An example that's relevant, in a previous school, and back in Arkansas, I remember a student sent an email to all their teachers saying like, "Hey, I actually want to be referred to as like this, this name. I want to be identified by this name, not my birth name." And a teacher actually went to the principal and said like, "This goes against my religion. I refuse to do this." And the principal said, "Please," sent an email requiring that all teachers refer to the student by their birth name based
Oh,
on the law at
man.
that time. And I just was like, and I'd been there for a little bit, I had very good rapport with this principal. I just like went to them and said, like, I'm not doing this. This is wrong. Sorry. And the principal said, like, I know I have to follow the law, but like you do what you think's right. And then in my classroom, we went by what I believe is right and still believe is right. And and the reason I'm naming that is like I think sometimes from a position of privilege, we're like, oh, it's not my battlefield. Like there are battles worth fighting, and you have to like
Yeah.
find that spot. And this is a really
Yeah.
tough moment. I'm not trying to be judgmental about how people choose
Right.
to fight their battles right now, but especially as white educators, I feel pretty strongly that sometimes we opt out of battles
Yeah.
that we should be drawing lines on, and it's really difficult. And I'm teaching in a different state right now that's much more supportive of my value system, so it's maybe like seems like a cop out for me to say that, but like I gave you an example of a time that was not like that, right? So,
Yeah.
I that's just on my mind,
Yeah.
especially given everything that's happening right now. And I think if 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 there's something that's not going to make a student feel supported and seen in your classroom, that feels like a red line.
Yeah.
If it's like, oh, this is a 5% late penalty I don't believe in, work on that.
Yeah.
Don't like draw a red line there. But I feel like if it's about making students feel safe and affirmed, that's worth drawing a line.
I
Those are
agree.
there's my example for
I
you, but,
agree.
like and it worked out fine, like, there was no recourse,
Yeah.
anything like.
Well, and I really appreciate you bringing our, it back to race and privilege, because you're right. Being white men, we have a lot more privilege that we can sacrifice to fight these battles for people who don't have that ability. So, you're 100%. I'm glad you framed it that way, because pick and choose your battles, and then as you become a veteran teacher, you do have more privilege, and then you can pick and fight some harder fights. So,
Yeah, just
sure.
peeking in the chat, like, that guy LP just, like, wrote, sorry, not knowing the actual name, the idea of, like, choosing your battles is also important for longevity, and,
Longevity.
like and I think that we need people who are gonna be in the classroom for a long time, right? We're
Yep.
both still in the classroom, and I think, uh everything can feel so urgent,
Yeah.
and you do need to be mindful of like what's the best choice for you if you're someone who values supporting students, the humanity of students, so that you can keep doing that work for a long time. And that also means taking care of yourself and all of that as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
we're
No, that's good.
we're like,
That's
yeah, go for it.
I was gonna say that's great. It's a great place to start, because it's like it seems super simple, but the more you dig into it, man, it can really elicit a lot of conversation. So, um, well, okay, so this next one's about content. Are you okay if I read this one?
Yeah, you go for it.
Yeah, it says, even as people with degrees and certifications, it's easy to feel imposter syndrome about content knowledge. What do English teachers do when faced with a new curriculum or text to teach? How do English teachers realistically stay curious about and engaged with ELA content itself, in addition to the pedagogical stuff? So, this definitely seems like a question up your alley. Um, I, I can only say that as a new teacher, it is still easy to feel imposter syndrome, especially if you're like thrown in and you're like, man, I don't know if I know as much as I thought I did. But I'd love to hear specifically with you. I mean, specifically with this is with like reading lists and new curriculum, things like that. Like you have to teach this book. How do you handle stuff like that?
Well, like more broadly, like I'm not gonna like flip it back to you, but I kind of am.
That's okay.
Like, imposter syndrome feels like something if I was an elementary teacher teaching all these different subjects, not to mention I feel like when you get a new curriculum, it's much more regimented.
Yeah.
It shifts what you're doing in the classroom more than what I think high school teachers tend to have.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you not feel I guess, sorry, like, not to be like, how do you have to teach so many different things in a given
Yeah.
day. How do you not feel imposter
Well,
syndrome?
I mean, when you graduate from teacher prep, whatever your program is, whether it's online, in person, community college, university, let's just acknowledge that you are not prepared for the classroom. Like that's just, I mean, it's an unfortunate thing, but you are just like, I mean, and again, I'm dating myself, but when I was going through college and going through my teacher prep stuff, I did not take like individual courses in how to teach science, how to teach reading, how to teach social studies. You kind of just do this basic, like, especially at the elementary level, how do children learn? It's a lot of, child psychology courses. And then you get to go watch teachers and do some student teaching. And then it's like, boom, here you go. Here's the curriculum. Here's the thing that you have to teach here, and just teach the way that we teach. It's almost like a trial by fire apprenticeship. Like we're just going to have you thrown in. It's easy to be like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I think that it's okay to give yourself permission to follow the curriculum guides, especially in areas where you are not well versed. Like if science isn't your jam and you're not a very strong, like I just don't know a lot about science or a lot about the scientific method, that wasn't my thing, then follow the curriculum guides and figure out ways to make it your own. But like for me, like the stuff that is my jam, like social studies, writing, creative writing, reading, I'm more comfortable feeling like less imposter syndrome in those areas than I am in the areas that I'm less strong in. So I guess to answer your question, I do feel imposter syndrome all the time, but I try and lean on the resources I have when I'm feeling that way. So if I'm teaching something that I'm like, man, I don't even know what this is, I'm going to lean on the curriculum guide because it's going to help me get through whatever this is. And then, I mean, I'm my own professional development. That's another piece of advice I would give young teachers. It's like, don't rely on your district to provide you professional development because funding comes and goes. Textbook companies decide oftentimes what professional development looks like. Vendors, come in and say, okay, we're all going to do professional development on this website, this new tech tool. So you be your own professional development. And if there's an area that you're lacking in, like dive in and like learn all you can about that on as much as you can. So, but you're right. We're like vets. I tell people like elementary school teachers are like veterinarians. Like we treat everything, whether it's a guinea pig or a frog that comes in, we're teaching it all. So
Yeah, and I think, like, there's a humility that comes with imposter syndrome that sometimes I think teachers can lose, and that's actually a bad thing. And I actually
yeah,
think art, like I'm trust me, like, if anyone who's been around me, like, in my current context in the last couple of years, like, there's a problem when, like, you get a curriculum and, like, you have to teach it, like, page by page, etcetera, right? But, like, a lot of curriculum comes from a place of research, and, like,
yeah,
they probably have a lot of things and ideas that you don't have yourself, and, like, leaning on that, especially early in your career,
yeah.
is really important. Like, I started off with, very little curriculum, like, I had 5 preps my first year. The 5th prep was personal finance, which is the irony of all ironies, is, like, right out of college, and, like, that was, like, living imposter syndrome, right? Like, I remember it's like story time here from back in the day. Uh, One day I showed up, I had, like, all my English classes prepped, like, my personal finance class was the first one in the day. This is my first year teaching. I was, like, really not sure what to do that day. I had no curriculum, by the way, for this
Yeah.
class. And I was like, and the kids who walked in, I'm like, "Okay, everyone take out a piece of paper and just copy what I copied from the board." And I started drawing, like, are you familiar with, John Wooded's, Pyramid of Success?
I maybe not. Maybe I'm confusing with a different pyramid. There's a lot of pyramids.
Yeah, he's a famous basketball coach from UCLA, had, like, a Pyramid of Success. I was a big John Wooden fan.
Oh, it's the pyramid that's in doesn't Ted Lasso have that framed in his
He does.
office?
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Yes.
I drew it, but then I, like, started making up things of, like, I call it the pyramid of financial success, and then, I had them, like, take notes on that, we talked about why different parts were in the pyramid all the way through, and, it definitely was not from, like, a textbook or anything, and then they had, like, a quiz over it later on. But I had a kid because I ended up officiating a wedding for a kid from that class, like, a decade later, and a kid came up to me, and he was like, "Mr. Luther, I gotta be honest, I didn't learn that much in high school that I still use, but that pyramid of financial success, that has stuck with me for" I felt so, like,
I
guilty, proud,
love
and, like,
that. That's
so
so funny.
yeah, no, truth like, that first year was rough for that financial success class. It was, like, freshmen and seniors, it was, like, all over the
Oh
place.
my gosh, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, like, 30 yeah, yeah, so sorry, I'm just getting, like, tremors.
No, I love story time. That's the great part about this. We get to just
But
talk to each other.
yeah, but in terms of, like, imposter syndrome, I think there is value in just, like, learning alongside your students authentically. Like, I remember a really good learning experience as a student myself when the teacher, I think it's for, like, a, AP Human Geography class, basically told us that he was 1 chapter ahead of us in the textbook, and he would read it, prep the materials, and we talk about it, and I learned a lot that year, and
Yeah,
there was an authenticity from him that I think I didn't experience with some very veteran teachers who knew a ton, but I felt so disconnected from their knowledge base and the way they brought it into the classroom. So I think there are values in that as long as you are also doing the work to eradicate that imposter syndrome
yeah,
with your own preparation. And I think that's the part that's so hard is those early years of teaching, you're already overwhelmed, but we really don't do very much even in high school, when you're, like, in content specific areas, very little PD is like, "Hey, here's how to know more about your content." It's almost
right.
all like, pedagogical moves that are important, but, like, content mastery matters, and I feel like we've devalued it. And I really, I think that that's something that's really difficult. Like you have to do it yourself, but then that gets like work life balance and all of those things. Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that about how to like find that balance?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard. I think with stuff that you're really interested in, like, I love US history, so I've got no problem taking personal time to dive more into, US history stuff. Um, I try and really make a habit of, um, if I don't know the content as well as I would like, then just like you saying, like modeling for my students, uh, an attitude of curiosity, like, you know, um, why, like I think because my kids are younger, I think of like, a lot of kids will say, well, why? Why do we have to do it this way? Why does this work? Why does the sun rise in the east and set in the west, kind of a thing? It's like, and it's well, if I don't have a good answer, then let's look it up. Let's like find the answer together. And I think having that co-construction of knowledge is really, really important. Um, but to your point about learning more about my content, there is no extra time. There's no good time to do it. So it's either going to be my personal time or it's going to be time that I'm taking to like during my school day. So my plan time. So as much as it's uncomfortable, I would rather like if I'm prepping for a lesson, kids are at recess and I'm prepping for a lesson and I don't know the content very well, instead of trying to come up with like at the last minute some sort of activity that's going to hide the fact that I don't know the content very well, I'd rather spend that time learning as much as I can and then structuring a way that we can co-learn this to get, together. And it's hard, it's scary because in a way you're relinquishing a lot of control as the teacher. You're like, you know what? I don't really have an activity for this or an experience planned for you because I'm just trying to figure this out myself. I'm thinking specifically with astronomy. I struggle with astronomy. I don't know what it is about space, but maybe just the size comparisons and things like that. Like I just have a hard time wrapping my head around stuff like that. But instead of trying to like know exactly what my moves are going to be, I try and be like, okay, so here's the big question that we're supposed to answer today. And here's where I'm coming into it. And then kind of like let that guide the lesson, I guess you could say. I've had more incredible learning experiences when I start that way than when I try and like mask the fact that I don't know something so that I can go home the night before and prep. So I try and do as much of my prep time at school and not bring it home. Obviously, it doesn't happen all the time. And then I just try and, like you said, throw it back at my students and say, like, let's do this together. Let's dig into this together. So
No, I think that's totally on point. And I think also, when I think back to those early years, I think being organized with your
yes,
new learning is really important for future years. So, like, I think there are a lot of times where I was like going through experiences as like first time teaching a book for to going back to the original question.
right,
I do all this work, and then like by the next year, it'd show up like, oh, where'd all that work go? And
right,
I think having really good systems, like I'm a someone like Google Drive, color coded folders for every year, like really trying to track that. But like maybe it's like, hey, I have my notes for each lesson I taught
right.
with this book. Here's what went well. Here's what students say that I want to like make notes of, and taking the time to invest in your future content mastery development as you're teaching something the first or second
Yeah,
time
yeah,
matters a lot. And like a weird pivot, because I think I want to like hit on some of the other questions. Like
yeah,
one of the questions was about ethical AI. How much do you think
yeah.
like educator resistance to AI and technology more broadly is imposter syndrome related? Do you think that that's part of like why teachers are so resistant to it? Or like
Ooh,
technology, like is there like an overlap, especially veteran teachers who are like, oh, I'm done with my imposter syndrome part of my career?
gosh, that's a really fascinating lens. I think the allure of AI, as with most technology, is it's going to make our lives easier. It's going to make our hard work less hard. And so if you're struggling with imposter syndrome and you're struggling with how to teach a book or you're running out of time, AI promises like, you know what, don't worry about it. You don't have to know your content. Just plug this into AI and we'll do it for, it'll do it for you. Um, that's I do think it's interesting. And I have one one experience with AI that was a total disaster in my classroom, and it taught me the biggest lessons. But like I was doing these book clubs, um, and I was having 6 different books going at the same time. Okay, and I've read all these books, but I hadn't read them all recently, and I didn't have time to reread 6 YA books and do some I was going to do some hexagonal thinking with them. I was going to do some hexagons. And I was like, okay, well, I need characters, quotes, themes, things that I can put on these hexagons. And I was like, I don't have time to go through all this. I was like, why don't I try AI? I was like, give me 15, and I put it in and I printed them out on hexagons. And I was like, this is great. It saved me all this time. So then we're going through, and this kid, it was in the group with the BFG by Roald Dahl. And this kid is obsessed with this book, BFG. He's read this book probably 30 times with his parents. He picked the group because he loves BFG. He comes up, he's like, Mr. Neibauer, this quote is not in the book. And I doubled down, Marcus. I was like, no, it is. Don't worry, it is. And he's like, Mr. Neibauer, I promise you it's not in the book. I was like, I'm pretty sure it is. So I'm like sweating on the inside, going, oh my gosh. I go to my computer, I'm trying to find the quote and a page number. And he's going through the book. I'm going through the book. Come to find out, AI just like made stuff up. And it didn't do it for just that BFG group. It like made up quotes from various conversations or dialogue in the book, and I had to own it. I was like, all right, class, I need to come clean. I was like, all of your hexagons are trash. I was like, I, and I explained what I did. I explained the whole situation, and we got a good laugh about it. But then what ended up happening was the kids were like, it's okay, Mr. But we got you. Let's just make our own. And that's what I wanted anyways. Like that's, so I think I had a moment, maybe it wasn't imposter syndrome, but I was like, I don't know enough about this thing to do what I want to do in the classroom. Let me try and offload it to AI, right? And it came back and bit me in, bad. Came back, blew up in my face. But if I had to go, I mean, obviously I would not do the AI, but the lesson I learned is that maybe I don't necessarily need to like know everything really, really well to still have a good experience. Be a good teacher. Like content mastery matters, but in certain things, like we are as teachers in an impossible profession where there's never going to be enough time to prep any sort of learning experience or lesson the way that you want, right? You're always going to go in feeling like, I'm not quite ready yet. If only I could get this copy made or this thing cut out or whatever. Um, I do think that, especially with younger teachers navigating AI, it's the promise of like, it's okay if you don't know science very well or astronomy very well. Just plug into this magic school bus AI or whatever, and it'll just make a lesson for you on the solar system. Great. I don't have to learn about the solar system. I just have to follow these steps. Like, I think you're right. I think you're right, Marcus. There is definitely that allure if you don't know the content as well as you want to.
Yeah, and you got some support in the chat. Lauren called that correctly a very teachable
Oh, it
moment.
was 100% a
Yeah,
teachable moment. I was so embarrassed. I was like, man.
looks like Jamal had some different reactions to it as well. But because like I think it cuts both ways. Because like Joe brought up in the chat that I really very much was kind of like intending with the questions. Like I think there's imposter syndrome in that people are resistant to technology sometimes who are veteran teachers who feel really good about their classroom. Like I'm raising my hand as this, and it's like I don't know about this new thing. Like I feel like an imposter for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
I don't really maybe like that's where some of the critiques come from. And I'm saying that as someone who's obviously leveraged many critiques about AI from different vantage points.
Yeah.
But I also think what you're bringing up is the flip side is like AI in a way is normalizing imposter syndrome of like
Yeah.
saying, hey, you don't have to be an expert. You can just use this tool. And for me on a personal level, that's what I worry most about right now that I haven't written about yet. And I know I've written quite a few things about it, is like I have got to a point in my career, and it's taken a while to feel really good about leveraging my relationship with students as writers over the course of the year and through feedback and building that trust and rapport, like where they know that I'm going to read and give valuable feedback and watch their journey as they grow. And it takes a lot of work, a lot of expertise, and I'm
Yeah.
still learning. And I feel for the first time in my career that that is being threatened. Like I could see like a district being like, "Hey, we bought this new tool. This is where you feed it in for like alignment, and everyone's gonna feed into this tool and spit out the feedback. And now you were bargaining that you need more time. Here's your time back." And I'm
Right.
like, "But what's the cost of that?"
What's the
So
cost?
like I don't want to be an imposter to my students' writing. And if I'm giving that writing to another tool, a tool that hallucinates and has problems, and we're not going to bring it in like the anti-Semitic rants that Grok went on this week with Twitter, like I don't know, like it was the first, like this summer's been the first summer I've thought about like what will I be as a teacher if that becomes the new norm, as someone who really like values and believes in like what it can be when you build that rapport and relationship with students in following their writing. And that's from an English teacher
Well,
lens.
and it sounds like that's going to be your line. And doing what you're doing, collecting those stories in your classroom is going to be able to help you tell that story so that you can hold that line 100%.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot like teachers, you know, the saying that we teach the way that we were taught. And I know that for me, teachers always held the owner of all the right answers. You need an answer to a question, you go talk to the teacher. And I think that I still struggle with wanting to know the right answer. And I'm curious for you as an English teacher with literature, because like I've had many arguments with colleagues about like what is the theme of this book that we want kids to latch onto. And like, you read books like Their Eyes Are Watching God or Beloved or these amazingly complex stories. Do you feel a pressure to like teach this book so that the kids walk away with this theme or this like I don't even know how to do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, what is the right answer for, like what is Their Eyes Are Watching God? What's the most important, character development point or plot point or whatever? Do you feel pressure to like have the right answer, or are you comfortable enough to be like, well, how Johnny interprets is going to be different than how, Shanae interprets?
Well, I think like great question. I'm like ruminating right here. I think two answers to that. Like number one is that like when it comes to like interpreting literature, I think I try to strive to create a classroom. Like we talk about one of our like opening core beliefs, and the analogy that goes with it is blindfolded men and the elephant, how they all
Yeah.
touch a different part of the elephant
Yeah.
and they get something different. We talk about that week one, and like the goal of a classroom we read stuff together is because we all bring our own experiences into a text. Therefore, we see different things. We interpret different things, and then we talk about them together so we can quote unquote see the whole elephant. Uh, and that includes me as a teacher, right? Like I emphasize to students that like every single year, whether it's with Their Eyes Are Watching God or another text, students will raise something that I did not notice myself.
Yeah.
And that's why like I am so like love being in a classroom, but like why it's important that I don't stand at the front of the room and say, here's what you need to know
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
So I do think though, to refute my own answer just there, that there are some red lines of like there's some certain moments in books or certain interpretations that they need to at least hear. Uh and I think like I need you to walk away from, chapters 16 and 17 of Their Eyes Were Watching God, understanding that this book is very much leveraging a critique of white supremacy
Yeah.
and it's the plague that it has been on American society, to all people, not just to people of color, though especially to people of color in terms of like direct consequences, and
Yeah.
how that ties into the next chapter that opens with domestic abuse. And
Yes.
there's an interlinking of that. It's like you turn the page, and the idea of power and patriarchy and white supremacy, like there's the juxtaposition is important. Like
Yeah.
I need to name that. If
Right.
like I can't just like, oh, this year they didn't notice that this year. I hope next year they see it. Like
Yes.
so
Okay.
so I think there's like a balancing act. Like what are the things that are like the non-negotiables that you at least need to hear this interpretation? And then but at the same time, are you cultivating a classroom where students feel empowered to bring their own interpretation and
Yeah.
have agency in how they read the text? Because I want both,
Right.
and they definitely can butt heads at times.
See, and I would much rather get that interpretation speaking to you as a colleague if we're both teaching this book than typing into AI what is the main theme of chapters 13 through 14.
Yeah.
because AI is going to give me something, but I'd much rather have a conversation with someone else who's read the book to talk about these themes and where we're coming from and how we're going to then present these to our students. And I think that AI threatens that because a lot of teachers don't have a colleague, a trusted colleague that they can go to, or they've never read these books, or they're being told they have to do a curriculum that is, that they're unfamiliar with. And so they're just like looking for shortcuts to just try and get through the day. And I worry about that for sure.
Yeah. And I think that actually is for me, like it kind of unlocks like, oh, maybe like one of the disconnects in the AI conversation. Cause I think some people talk about AI from the point of like not necessarily imposter syndrome, but like a content deficit where it's like, I
Yeah.
don't know enough about this. I
Right.
need help. Like if my 5 year old asked me a question about astronomy, like AI would like be better than me just riffing on my own and like
Right.
making things up, right? So I think if you're a struggling writer and you have to send emails that you will be judged for in your job, then
Yeah.
using AI, you're coming at it from a point of content deficit.
Right.
I think a lot of times when I talk about AI in the classroom as a teacher, I'm coming at it from a content expertise. And I'm saying that it's like year 14, a lot to learn,
Right.
right? But like,
Right.
so I think sometimes maybe when I disagree with people about AI, it's like, I believe that all teachers, like, we should be working to give them content mastery and support them in content mastery and expertise, and I'm worried that this is the replacement for that.
Yeah.
That it's like, "Hey, it's impossible to get all these teachers the time and support and resources
Right.
to make them really expert in their content and, like, mastery of stuff, but
Yeah.
here's this AI tool." And I get from a pragmatic standpoint, you're like, "Well, it's better that than nothing," right? It's better if you are a brand new teacher. Honestly, the AI feedback tool might be better than what you're giving as a brand new teacher right out of the gates in terms of like the actual understanding of the skills that you're giving feedback on.
Yeah.
But in my mind, we should have a higher bar for
Yeah.
ourselves as
Yeah.
educators. We should have a higher, our students deserve more than that, especially given what we're seeing right now. So I think that's my impasse right now is like that. I think what you acknowledged is like it might be coming from just different lenses and how we look at the work.
Yeah, I agree. And I think normalizing not knowing. I mean, like, because it's okay as a first year teacher to not know. And it's okay as a year 20 teacher, year 15 teacher to not know certain things. I think there's a lot of pressure on teachers like you've been teaching long enough, you need to be an expert at all the things. But the truth is that society is incredibly dynamic and classrooms are completely diverse, and the classroom that I'm teaching in 2025 is way different than the classroom I taught in 2002. And so like it's okay to say I don't really know how to handle this thing right now, but I'm going to go find out instead of pretending that I don't know and using AI to mask my deficit, I guess you could say. So, yeah, that's a tough one. That's a good question, though.
Yeah, it is, and I appreciate the initial response and the lot of responses in the chat, which is fun to kind of follow along with.
Yeah,
Uh, a question I really wanted that someone sent in was about behavior, and it's in the middle of the
yeah,
summer, so it's a kind of I think it's actually there's a little bit of distance that makes this question maybe easier to answer.
yeah,
Is what do you do when you get to those points in a classroom? It might not have been like this past year, but like I know that we've all had these at certain moments in our career where you feel just like at a loss, like what you're doing is not working, you don't feel supported, and you feel overwhelmed by student behavior in your classroom. Like, what would you say to an early career teacher who's in one of those spaces? Like, what would be like your first go to when they feel just overwhelmed by what's happening in their classroom?
I've I've had yeah, I've had some tough classes the last like post pandemic. So this question really hit me hard. Seventh and eighth grade is those are tough years as well. I teach fifth grade for people who are watching, um, and I've had some challenging years. The thing is, let's see. I've made hard situations worse. I've made challenging situations more challenging when I try and keep the power dynamic as such so that I am not able to fully empathize or understand the situation coming from my student. So when I'm like, you're going to do it my way, whether you like it or not, and this is the way it's going to be, I will get through the year, but it's gonna be very, very painful. So when things are not working, when I'm struggling with behavior, talking disrespect is constant. Um, I I'm not saying this is like a cure-all magic thing, but when I've had really real conversations with kids and then likewise with parents and say, look, I really it really bothers me when you speak to me this way. Like, I don't know how to respond to you when you come at me with such disrespect or such, vitriol. I have more and then, like, try and have a conversation that way than saying to Johnny, like, "You better watch your mouth. You talk to me like that, you're out of here," kind of a thing. Um and then even with parents, because what I find is that when I'm more authentically human, then I get some really interesting responses that are, again, they help me inform how I'm gonna handle this situation. So when I'm having these conversations with students and I'm like, I really struggle with the way you're speaking to me, or I'm calling home and saying, you know what, I'm really struggling with how so and so is behaving. Can we meet or chat? Oftentimes parents are like, I'm really struggling too. I don't know what like they're just as exasperated as I am, right? And that's very telling to me as a teacher because if a parent is really struggling with that with their own child, then I'm in a very unique position because I'm not that child's parent, but I'm spending as much, if not more, time with that child than their own parents. And so they're acting with me the way that they act at home. So having those conversations with kids when you feel like at a loss and like again, explain where your lines are. Like, listen, I know you don't like reading. I know that it's hard for you or math is hard for you, but you can't throw your book across the room every time I ask you to do something. Like we got to have some boundaries and then try to involve them in those conversations. Like, I know this is hard for you, but I'm here to help you. Like, I feel like I get more success when I enter in those difficult conversations that way than when I try and hold some moral high ground. Like, you're going to respect me no matter what. Um, and I wish I could say it works every time because unfortunately, there's a lot of kids who've come in with a lot of anger or trauma, academic trauma from previous classroom experiences. And they take one look at me and they're like, forget it. I'm not doing anything you say. Um, but even with those things, I tend to get I get more connection with students when I try and enter into those conversations as humanely as possible. But it's definitely feels like it can make days really hard and like you feel like at a complete loss of what to do. Um, is it do you feel like when the kids get older, the level of disrespect is more elevated? Like if a 10-year-old is like yelling at me, they're still 10 and I can kind of separate the fact that they're having like a tantrum because they're 10. But when they're like 16, right? If you teach sophomores, juniors, like when they're like 16 years old, does it feel like it's more threatening to be di- disrespected that way? Is it harder not to get sucked in to the emotionality of that kind of thing?
I think it's more triggering. I think especially early in
Triggering.
your career,
Yeah.
and I think it gets easier in my experience. I think you get a little bit like calcified to like that, like this dynamic, and especially like the wipe the slate. Because like every day, like I believe personally, like a kid deserves to have a new chance to be their best
Yes.
self, no matter what
Yeah.
happened before. I think
Right.
that's because like in our adult lives, we don't do that, right? If someone like
Right.
is disrespectful to you 4 days in a row, on Friday you don't walk in and say like, "Hey, excited for you to have a great day," like, but like
Yeah.
that's what you
True.
need to do in the classroom, and, like, when you got these juniors and seniors sometimes walking in, like, that's tricky, right? Because you don't wanna, like, condition them, like, that's okay, but, like so I think it's definitely harder. I think, like, that power dynamic, though, is, like, when you mention that and, like, ways to flatten that and to not, like you're not, like, getting rid of your authority as a teacher with the example you gave, but you're acknowledging your humanity because your position as a teacher, as a position of authority might blind them to that,
Yeah.
especially given past experiences they might bring into your classroom. Like, I know I also think, like, 2 things, like, on this question that was really thoughtfully shared by, a listener was like, the first would be, knowing like, there's 2 different contexts. Like, I've been in schools where I remember I was just talking with Jim, recently, and I remember my first year, like we got an all call at a high school that was already pretty difficult in terms of behavior. And there was an all call announcement that was the principal's office has too many students being set down. please do not send anyone down to the office the rest of the week. We will send them back to your classroom if you do. They didn't like send that as like a private email to teachers.
That was like an announcement?
That was an all call. Like, and I remember as like a first year teacher, like you hear the announcement, it's like a horror movie. You like look at your, you make eye contact with your students after that, like they just heard it too, and it's like again, stories from year one in the classroom. You can imagine what
Oh
that
my
week was
gosh.
like. If you're like, there's those situations, and then there's situations where you have lots of building support and principal support, and you have lots of adults who can help you, where you really shouldn't be trying to solve all the problems. And sometimes the best thing you can say is like, I've tried all the things I can, I need help. And I think
Yeah.
something I lean on even to this day, like I had multiple students this year where I was like, I am trying every month, like I've done all my moves, I'm trying everything, I'm at a loss, I need help.
Yep.
And like being willing to go have those conversations is really important too. But sometimes we don't have those supports, and I've been in those situations where you don't have those supports. So, a strategy, like I remember, like one classroom that was definitely like a school where I did not have support, to the degree that I needed it. And one of my moves, like I had one class period that was just kind of out of control, and I went home one night and just like wrote, they just like turned in like an exit ticket. It was not that well done. But like I just wrote like a longer response to each of them. Like, yeah, I was giving them feedback on what they did, but like just saying like something I appreciated about them, like something I was noticing, like trying to like personalize that response. And just like so the next day when they came into class, they had that personal note, like, and I've often said, like, just write a student a note. Like, I've had students even in my current situation where they're struggling in class, and all I do is I just like write like a long like sticky note, like saying like middle class, like maybe like they're refusing to work or they're being disrespectful in certain ways or like we're not connecting. And it's like, hey, I really have been proud of how well you've done this year. I'm struggling to figure out how to support you right now, but I just want you to know I still believe in you, still care about you as a person, and I want to keep working. And just I just want you to know that I'm always open to feedback from you. And I really want to make sure we find a way to make this succeed. And it's like a quiet, like set it on their paper while you're walking around the room and like they see that. And it doesn't always work. It's not like a magic switch, but like finding ways to let students know that you still support them and care about them, even when they're struggling and maybe your relationship with them is struggling.
Yeah.
I've found that handwritten notes do a lot of work in this current moment with so much digital communication. Like one of those handwritten notes, like I found from a kid who then went on to do just fine the rest of the course. And then I got their spiral notebook like a month later when I was grading it, and they still had that note pinned to the front. Uh, like it's like little things like that can matter, but like I also just like it's hard right now. I mean, elementary schools, right? Like behavior can be really difficult, where they don't have that development that
Yeah.
they might have in high school. Like, what do you do when you're overwhelmed by that? And I'm also keeping mindful of the clock. We'll probably wrap up
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, there is no magic switch. I think that being at the elementary level, I have to have certain expectations that are sometimes drastically different than what their expectations are at home. I'm speaking specifically to like tech use. Like many of my students in 2025, they've had an iPad since they were 6, and they've been on screens, for 12 plus hours a day for the last 10 years. So when they come into my classroom and we're doing things that are, yes, I've got some technology, but we're also not going to be using our technology all day long, every day. Um, that can be a drastic difference in expectations. And so I think when I try and have those clear conversations with them and say, I just like you. I mean, I really agree. I love that you framed it that way of like a student note. I still believe in you. I still want to work for you. Um, I try and explain that to my students that like I'm here for you, and if you are behaving in a certain way that makes it difficult for me to do my job, then I can't get you what you need. And having those human conversations, you're right, it's not a magic switch, but it does really do a lot. It's almost like even by 5th grade, a lot of kids don't have experience with like, I don't even know what to call it, like radical empathy, like people who just care about them just because that they're just kids. Um, and so it can be a little off-putting, like maybe this person's just trying to butter me up and I'm gonna just keep my walls up, as like Brene Brown says, keep that armor on. But the more that I keep persistent with the human empathy and the like, I care about you, but we're going to have some expectations. Um, you know, it does wonders by the end of the year. I mean, I'm not saying it makes for an easy year, but I mean, by the end of the year, Marcus, those are the kids that come back and give you a hug at the end of graduation and say, "You were my favorite teacher." And I'm like, "What? Like what?" Like they're the ones that come back and visit you years later. And it's like, I never expect to see these people ever again because we had such a hard time. But obviously, those things, those radical acts of kindness get through to kids. Um, and I don't know. That's my line. I'm gonna do that as much as possible versus, referring them out of my room because I know that when they're out of my room, I can't control what kind of experience they're gonna have. Now, obviously, there's boundaries. Like if kids are throwing furniture, they're gonna have to leave because it's a safety issue. But yeah, those radical acts of kindness, I call them. We just got to keep doing them because kids need them. They need them more now than ever. Honestly.
I think like radical, but also like reliable, right? Like where it's
Yeah.
like they know that Mr. Neibauer is gonna keep showing up for me even when I don't show up my best self. And like,
Yeah.
and even if that one student doesn't see it, the rest of the students in the room see that
See
you're
it. Right.
consistently doing that. And I like co-sign everything you said, right? Like in terms of like I've had those graduation conversations where there's those students where it's like, oh man, we had a tough situation, but actually I have a better rapport with you after this class than the student who just like coasted through and did all the
Right.
things that they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like I I think that believing in the long game of like when you're in those spots where it's like you can't solve anything, like still showing up aligned to your values, which we started with at the start of
Yeah.
this conversation, like believing that that's going to pay off in the long term definitely matters. I know like Joe in the chat mentioned like the phrase. I know Jen Gonzalez and I think Alex Shepard and Vanette have talked about unconditional positive
Mhm.
regard. Like just
Yeah.
choosing that is definitely something I subscribe to. It's hard, right? Like it takes like especially when you're tired and burnt out yourself, like to
Yeah.
when you've got 200 kids, like
Yeah.
unconditional positive regard can be a lot. Also want to like circle back to some other points like in the chat just because I really appreciate people engaging the way that they did.
Yeah.
This is new for us, so like give us feedback about how we can do better as a tandem. I know Adrian has more experience with this format.
Well, I'm just used to talking by myself where I just rant for 30 minutes. So this is great.
Yeah. I think like Lauren bringing up that I think it's really important to like not ever put on like that savior mentality of like, oh, if you just do this, it'll solve these like there's some really hard behavior situations. That's why I was trying to share the story about that, the all call announcement, because
Right.
I do think sometimes the system is going to outweigh the individual. Like that's why it's the system and not individual. And giving yourself grace and generosity and knowing if you're in one of those situations where there isn't like a button you can push or a
Yeah.
specific tool or strategy that's going to solve that broader thing. And I also want to respond to Stephen had some really thoughtful points. I know we've talked online about AI, and I know him and I have different vantage points sometimes, more aligned others. He said like the idea that AI removes the asymmetry in knowledge between student and teacher. I guess like respectfully, like and I'd happy to, like go back and forth like over email on this or something. Like I think I disagree with that because I think like that surface level it might do that, but like me like spark noting my way through a book doesn't like do the same thing as me actually spending the time sitting and reading. So like a kid who's using, and I think in certain ways, maybe if a teacher, like Stephen, your point, like has an imposter syndrome themselves, then like yeah, the AI might be better than that imposter syndrome teacher. But the expertise the teacher brings in the room, and we should be cultivating classrooms and schools where teachers have this expertise. AI is not going to shortcut that, right? That takes years of being in classroom and facilitating conversation and analyzing text to cultivate. And I do think that, I'm not saying that you're doing this, but when it comes to writing and when it comes to other aspects of our education system, I feel like we have a deficit mindset about how much value those things have and how much expertise is needed to reach for them to be authentically good when it comes to writing. And I think sometimes, again, this is not what Steven's saying, but like what I've experienced is I see people who are not just taking shortcuts, but normalizing shortcuts as if the writing didn't matter already. And I worry about the long-term implications of that of looking at AI as a tool for that expertise and content knowledge. And yes, we need more of that in schools, and we don't have that expertise and content knowledge to the degree uh, right now in every classroom as students deserve. But I don't think AI is the solution to that in
Yeah.
its current form. Because, yeah, I guess I just want, it was a really thoughtful point. I
It
want
is
to,
a thoughtful point.
yeah,
I think that AI promises to democratize access to knowledge, but I think to your point, like AI is not giving any sort of incredible deep knowledge yet. Maybe it will at some time in the future. So right now I'm pretty much viewing AI almost like fast food. Like it's easy, it's quick. It'll help you feel fed or like cliff notes, but I'm not interested in just giving my kids like I want them to go deep into whatever it is that we're learning. And so I think to your point or to your comparison of like the Cliff Notes version, that might get you fine just to like pass the test, but that's not going to stay with you or live with you, for the rest of your life. Like I'm trying to help my students, and maybe this is like an audacious, ridiculous goal, but like I want them to remember things in my classroom that they learned. I want them to remember them for the rest of their lives. And if they're using AI, I just don't think they're going to get that deep critical thinking that's something that's going to be memorable and lasting. So I don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I'm gonna have to think on that a little bit more, but
yeah.
um,
I think there's also like human capacity, like social media. You can like reach and access way more people than you could like before social media existed. But that doesn't mean that like there's a quantity versus quality thing. So
right.
even if you have access to so much more knowledge and doesn't even if the quality is good, let's like set aside hallucinations. Let's say like you have a click of a button away from all the greatest knowledge in the world. You kind of already had that. Now it's just easier to
Yeah.
access. It doesn't mean that you internalize that to the same depth. Like we're humans, like we have limitations, right?
Yeah.
Like and same way with like relationships and friendships, right? Like and I think I want to make sure I'm still humble enough to acknowledge that it's spending time, the time spent to acquire, like, I'm reading Place of Greater Safety right now.
Okay.
It is 'cause it's a slow read, I'm reading it once a week, like, and I did that with War and Peace last year. I internalized my understanding of that book by participating in a forum and like working with others in a different way than if I just sped read a book on my own, let alone like spark noted or read some summary of it. And the knowledge and expertise I get from spending time with that is different. And I would argue way more valuable. And I think that that for me parallels the idea of I'm gonna, take this AI shortcut to knowledge that might get me what I need to understand for this test, but it's not gonna stick with you. And it's not
Yeah.
gonna have that value to the same degree. And I think that's where I'm just like trying to hold that. I mean, also just looking at the clock, we've been going for a while and
Yeah.
here I'm like mindful of that. Sorry about the camera issue too.
That's okay. That's all right.
But I think we could go on. We could do like a whole AI chat. Maybe we'll do that.
We could. We could do a whole live Substack AI chat. I bet it'd be a really fascinating conversation. So
Yeah. So I don't know. What are your like closing thoughts? Like we've been talking for a lot. I think we've
we
hit.
have been talking for a lot, but Marcus, as always, I'm just so grateful to have you as a person to talk with, as a fellow teacher. I love the fact that we teach almost like I wouldn't say diametrically opposed grade levels, but they're pretty far apart. And I just love the fact that you're willing to talk shop with me a little bit over the summer. It, you know, this may not be true for everybody, but it fills me up it gets me excited about teaching and learning. And I love, just getting the opportunity to try this new live feature with you. In the past, I've just kind of like done it as like a personal reflection at the end of a long month or something, but this is cool, and I'm very grateful for you to take time to kind of almost do like a live podcast with me. So it didn't feel like an hour, but yeah, we've been talking for a while.
Yeah, and I appreciate people in the chat because like that's the part that when we do like a podcast recording, you kind of like record it, and then like a couple weeks later it comes out, and you don't really
Right.
know, you don't have a chance to respond. And I appreciate like it kind of is energizing. So it's been really cool to see that people are engaged with this.
Yeah.
The new thing. I'm sure we can do better in that, but I do think before the summer ends, trying to have at least one more of these, and I could imagine like a situation where during the school year, like irregularly, like we like get questions and just talk about how it's
Yeah.
doing. Because I do think this format is cool. Uh, there's downsides to it, but I think that there are some upsides. So I've really enjoyed
Yeah.
this today. And
Yeah.
thank you. I guess my big thing is thank you, people who've been responding to
Yeah.
chat. And I really appreciate I mean, Adrian and I don't agree on everything all the time. I know that people in the chat have different viewpoints because I do think it's important to step away from like this. I think like, social media is like the worst place to disagree, right? Like, because
Right.
like limited format and like the lack of humanity and empathy at times. And I think conversations are great for that. And this was a good format to just keep building networks and
Yeah,
staying in community over the summer.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I don't
All
know
right, man.
how does this thing end? I don't
Yeah.
know. You
Well,
just like click a button.
I click a button and it says end, and then we can get this out to people. They're going to give us a recording of it, so we'll be able to send it out, for people who who missed it. But yeah, I literally just click end. So when you're ready, I can click end. So I appreciate you, Marcus, as always, man. Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Until next time. And thank you, everyone else. And we'll try to send this out when it's whatever format we get. Take
All
care.
right. Thanks, guys.